Hello, everyone. This is Bill Griffin. Welcome to Different Take Podcast. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share, comment. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Mr. Steve Knudsen, who is the Gwinnett County Board of Education Vice Chair. He's in District 2. If you don't live in Georgia, I think this is still of interest around the country. He's been married 36 years, or has been married for 36 years, still married. 4 children, very involved in their athletics, has been a resident of Gwinnett County, Georgia for 25 years, and is very active in the community, in his church, and his occupation. He's a businessman. And thank you for doing this, Steve.
Yeah, my pleasure, Bill. I appreciate your desire to get involved and help the community look into various things that are of interest to you.
Thank you. I should mention that it's early for you. You're on the West Coast, and we're doing this 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, it's one of those things. My body hasn't quite fully adjusted to West Coast time, so I was going to be up early anyway.
So I'll go ahead and get started. You're running for your second term, so you're elected and started your first term in 2019. What would you like to see the board do in this if you're reelected? And basically, why are you doing this again?
Yeah, the thing that's going on now is really trying to keep the eye on the ball. Student achievement. There's a lot of different things around the country that gain a lot of interest. A lot of school boards doing some pretty interesting things. And when I look at what gets most of the attention, it doesn't have anything to do with student achievement. And that's what we're here for. We're here to make sure that the kids are ready for what comes next, whether it's career or college, or maybe even the military. Those are really the 3 options that our kids have. And we want the 180,000 plus students in Gwinnett County to be able to step seamlessly into any of those 3 roles. And so what happens and what can happen is we can lose sight of that. And so my focus has been and will always continue to be student achievement, pursuing excellence, and then closing gaps where we have them. And there are going to be gaps. You're a business owner, you know how that works. And so you've always got to find those gaps, and you've got to close those up and do the best job you can at that while you produce a great product.
What is the difference in the interaction that parents have had with the board in 2019 as opposed to today? Is there a difference in the level?
Yeah, there definitely is. I think there's a lot of things that have contributed to that. Social media continues to contribute to that. The access to information, just via the internet, the things that we have, doesn't matter where in the world it happens, you know about it almost instantaneously. And so that continues to accelerate. So we used to have, steady interaction with parents as a board for 40 years. It wasn't until just a couple of years ago that the legislature required school boards to have a public speaking time. But for 40 years, Gwinnett County had actually 2 speaking times, one both before and after our work session. But what happened with the pandemic, there were so many different views on so many different issues, and having to wrestle with the safety of the kids and people having different views on the severity of the virus, I think exacerbated some of that. So we have a constant stream of interaction now, and it's good. I mean, we want to hear from people, and we want them to let us know. Emails. There's so many ways for them to communicate with us now. We've got email, we've got phone, we've got them coming to the board meeting. So we're hearing from folks, and it's consistent and ongoing. And that the issues will narrow and then they'll broaden depending on what's going on in the greater society. And but we look forward to hearing from what people think about what's going on.
So I'm just curious. So in 2019, could you sort of quantify the level of interaction or complaints, if you will, compared to today? Is it twice as much or?
It's hard. It's hard to know exactly what those numbers would be. Twice as much could be. I would say that let's use the word passion behind the complaints might be a little higher these days. I think, with the change that's taking place in Gwinnett, we went from, a superintendent of in 2019, Mr. Wilbanks would have been serving in, almost 25 years in the position. The board had minimal change. I replaced a 24-year incumbent. Mr. Blair replaced a 24-year incumbent. So before that, the shortest term of a board member was, I think, 14 or 16 years, depending on the term when they were elected. So there was a tremendous amount of trust within the community for what Mr. Wilbanks and his leadership team and his governance team was doing and were able to accomplish. We've had some transition. We've added 2 new board members. We've changed superintendents. And so with change comes uncertainty. And I think sometimes with uncertainty causes scrutiny, and that scrutiny can lead to, ideas and perceptions that maybe aren't always correct. But the level of trust, I think, leads to more input.
If this is the first time you're watching, I usually don't sound like this. I'm pretty hoarse. So the next question I had was, does the Gwinnett County Schools do they outsource any of their schools, i.e. charter schools?
We have one charter school right now, North Metro Academy of the Arts. They came to us, wanted to. So the way that the school systems in Georgia work, technically, a lot of the public school systems are called charter systems, and so if you want to start a school, you have the option of applying and rolling up under the state charter system, or you can come under the local education system, the school district, and be a charter school under them. So North Academy of the Arts, North Metro Academy of the Arts came to us and asked us if they could come under our umbrella and operate under us. And so we do have one school. They started leasing space from us, or actually in the last year, they've started leasing space for us. The space that they had, I'm trying to remember the landlord, something happened in terms of, and the real estate market has been crazy. And so I can't remember what the motivation was to the landlord. Landlord decided not to renew the lease. So we were able to give them some space in a building that was underutilized.
Are there plans to do any other ones?
No, not as a school district. Now, I can't say that someone in the greater community might try to do the same thing that North Metro has done. There might be a group of parents within the community that want to start a charter school that has a certain focus in addition to the normal academics. But no, Gwinnett County as a school system, Bill, has done an amazing job of creating pathways and academies and our academic knowledge and skills, our AKS, what we call our curriculum. We provide so much variety to the students of Gwinnett County that I think per capita, and I haven't done the research and I'm not a researcher, but I think per capita, we have fewer kids involved in private schools and charter schools in Gwinnett County than probably most school districts, partly because we've been able to offer so many different choices to kids coming through our system. that they don't have to go elsewhere to find that school that fits their needs. Does that make sense?
Yes. Are parents currently being allowed or offered, if they choose to leave the system, a voucher to take their kids out of the system and educate them elsewhere?
Yeah, so that's a state legislative question, right? So that's one of the things that happens a lot in this arena is a lot of people think that we're in charge of a lot more things than we are. The state legislature has I think you call it I'm trying to think about the promise. Anyway, they have a for economically disadvantaged folks. There is I think it was $100 million. It's supported by tax credits by the taxpayer. So if you support that, you get a credit on your taxes. They do that up to 120 million. I think they just raised it in this legislative session to 120 million. And that's basically where you can a parent can apply for a scholarship, but there's no voucher currently available. The state legislature would have to authorize that. And there was a bill going through the legislature, but it died. It did not pass, did not get to the governor.
Do you advocate for such things?
Well, here's the deal. One of the things that when we look at the requirements that we have for from our accrediting body, from the Georgia School Board Association, when you get into public education, our position as a board is not supportive of that. The concern is that it could affect the funding that we get to educate kids. And when we look at the fact that 90% of the kids in our county are educated within Gwinnett County public schools, and we have limited resources, then our position as a board and our legislative team is to not support that. Personally, I'm a business guy, and I believe in the free market. I believe in competition. We don't have this problem in Gwinnett County schools, but and again, just personally, I believe that if a family is part of a failing school, we don't have those in Gwinnett County, that they ought to have the ability to find success for their kids. And so it's hard for me as a person to say, and again, the context, you got to take in the context. Gwinnett County schools, we don't have failing schools. So I think what we have to offer a family is everything they need to allow their child the opportunity to succeed. But there are conditions in different parts of the state and maybe different parts of the country where that's not the case. And not everybody's in a position to be able to afford tuition at a private school or to homeschool. But as a board, and you would find this to be consistent among all boards across the state, that we all work on a limited budget. And so therefore, the idea that the legislature might at some point in time take money from the public schools, it's a difficult position.
So people advocate for something called equitable discipline policies, and opposed to, and that implies to me that you don't treat everyone similarly in the same circumstances. What do you understand that to mean? And is that something that parents ought to be concerned about?
Well, so Bill, what you're talking about is disparate numbers, and disparate numbers mean that if you look at our population groups, the demographics of the children that attend Gwinnett County Public Schools, and those are pretty clear. We got about 33% African American, 33% Hispanic, about 11% Asian, about 19% Caucasian, and then a 3 or 4% other. Our discipline numbers don't reflect those same numbers, and there's a number of reasons for that. So when you have people, the word that they use, equity, and that we've got to eliminate disparate numbers, it's impossible. take another, and they're talking about race in most cases, take another demographic, male, female. Our numbers are disparate among our male students and our female students. No one's advocating that we somehow figure out if there's 51% girls and 49% guys, that we have discipline numbers that are exactly 51% girls and 49% guys. You know what I'm saying? So what I want to make sure, and this kind of goes back to, we have a code, we have a student behavior code. That student behavior code is neutral. It defines the behavior that's necessary for us to do what we do within Gwinnett County Public Schools. What we need to look at is we always need to constantly look at the implementation, the application of that discipline code on the front end, and then the enforcement of that discipline code on the back end. That's where we can see certain things that might affect those numbers. I think that Gwinnett County does a pretty good job of fairly applying its code, its student behavior code. If we get to the point where we're looking at an immutable characteristic and deciding that somehow we need to differentiate how we apply that code, that's a problem. So because an outburst disrupting a class doesn't affect, shouldn't be based upon what your culture is, what your background is, what your race is. And no matter what your culture is, your background and your race, we can't have classroom disruptions and still achieve world-class status as a school system.
So the people that really are very, I'm sure you're aware, people very outspoken about that needs to happen, that there needs to be equitable discipline policies. What are they looking for? Because I don't really understand specifically what they're trying to accomplish, because they're board members that advocate this a lot, right?
So I think what they're looking for, Bill, is they're looking for fairness. They're looking for justice. And what I've said to people all across the spectrum, I don't care where your ideology is, I don't care what your race is. If there's injustice, it needs to be addressed. Okay. But what we have to do is we have to do a better job of understanding and communicating how we fairly and justly apply our code. If we can fairly and justly apply our code, I think that's what people are looking for. I don't think they're looking for because if we do that, Bill, then we'll have good classrooms, well-behaved students. We talk about the AKS, the academic knowledge and skills. Okay. If we water down our behavior code and we allow kids to get away with behaviors in our classroom that don't work in the real life, you ran a business, I run a business. If my guys don't show up on time, if they don't have a good attitude, if they don't work well, if they don't do what they're asked, when they're asked to do it, then my product doesn't get produced. Your product doesn't get produced, right? You have to have the right behavior to succeed in this life. And it's our job to not only teach academics, but teach behavioral skills in the process of learning those academics that give our kids the ability to succeed later. So we're doing them a disservice if we don't provide a behavioral code and enforce that code. Now, the key is the key is that we do it in a way that is fair and just, and that our community trusts us to do that. And in the past, and some of those numbers will produce a perception that maybe there's a lack of trust, or maybe there's not fairness and there's not just a just application, and so therefore there's a lack of trust. We have to make sure that we do everything we can, as often as we can, whenever necessary, to demonstrate that it's fair and it's just, and that and communicate so that we can improve the trust that we have in our community.
Okay. that may get to the next question. It seems parents express a lot of concern about this. Is the notion of systemic racism taught in the system in an uncritical manner currently?
I'll try to make sure I understand that question. I do not believe that systemic racism, and I've been trying to learn a lot, Bill, about this. There's, it's, I'll give you an example. We had a recent board training where we had a PhD talk to us about bias. And one of the things he said about bias was he said that there's two things you need to have bias. And one of those is you have to have a heartbeat. And one of those is you have to live in a society. So basically what he's saying is that we all have some form of bias. And he said, based on 50 years of scientific research and all this sort of stuff, and I'll give him that. I think we're biased. If a boy shows up to date my daughter and he looks a certain way, I might say, yeah, you look great. Go on the date with my daughter. If he looks another way, I might say, you know what? I'm not so happy you're going on. I think my daughter may have a cough or a cold. There may be some reason she can't go on this date with you, right? We all have a certain amount of bias. What was interesting is as we learned about it, and the instrument that we used to sort of show us where we have some bias personally, was that the company that had that instrument had 30 different areas of bias. Now we happen to take the test on racial bias, but racial bias isn't even the most biased area we have in our society today. Elderly bias and obesity bias are two areas of bias that are even greater amongst us as people. So I'm just throwing those thoughts out there so you get an idea for the basis within which. So because there is and always will be some level of bias amongst us in different areas, some people are trying to make the leap that, and I could go into deeper and deeper and deeper, how he believes that our society has helped to formulate that bias. But people want to make the leap from a level of bias racially to systemic racism. I think that's a leap too far. I think that because we may have bias, or we do have bias, I think we have to be constantly vigilant that we're not allowing that bias to apply to the enforcement of our behavior or the education of our kids. And so there are some things we can do along those lines to help people with that. But we're not in Gwinnett County doing anything in an uncritical manner that establishes or continues to establish a racial divide. It's not happening. We don't want it to happen. I've talked at length with our curriculum people. And so, without belaboring the point, some people will take that leap from bias to a systemic sort of accusation, and then they want to look at disparate numbers, let's say within discipline, and try to prove their point. The problem, Bill, with that is that as a social scientist, which I'm not, but in talking to those that are in that camp, there are so many different things that factor into the behavior of a child, that to say that our disparate numbers, or to say that we need to teach in a certain way, along those lines, it's not accurate. You know what I'm saying? There's so many things that come into it. So I don't know if I actually answered your question, but
yeah, I think
there may be a more specific point you're trying to get to. But
well, I use the word uncritically, So I'll go to critically. I see a parade on the meetings, and just correct me if I'm wrong. There's a parade of students, teachers, and there's also school boards who say unequivocally that systemic racism exists, which would imply that this is taught as a concept. I guess the argument is whether it's taught as a given or as it's taught as a theory. But to kind of buttress that evidence, there's a gentleman running for District 4. His name is Tony Sellers. He's actually on a video. He's a former teacher in Gwinnett County. He's actually on the video saying that some candidates forum thing, that he uses Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. People don't know what that is. His opinion. It is total theory. It is not. It is based on one man's selection of different events. Some probably not true. That book really, in my opinion, shouldn't be taught in a classroom because it's an opinion. And it's totally anti-capitalist. And it's also teaches that systemic racism exists. The two, many people think, go hand in hand. So I guess the question is do you understand that it's taught as a theory and that it is a prominent theory that's taught in the school system by many teachers?
Yeah, okay. We have 12,000 teachers, Bill. Howard Zinn is not in our AKS. Okay. And I've got a supporter of mine. We've been talking a lot about this, and he's been working to try to get the not opposition research, but the refutation of Howard Zinn and what he has to say into our libraries and provide those books and try to get those because, again, to your point, it's not wrong to share Zinn and his opinion if you then can share the other side of it and create the debate and the interchange over what he has to say versus reality. I'm with you. It's the lousy, from my perspective, it's a lousy take on the history of America. I don't think there's a lot of truth to it. But I would say that this is one of the things that when you talk about parental involvement, this is one of the areas where I think parents can be incredibly helpful. Again, Howard Zinn's not a part of the AKS. That doesn't mean that a social studies teacher couldn't take some Howard Zinn and have a discussion with his students. If it strays from what we're trying to get across in the AKS, then it would be inappropriate. And so that's where, I think parents, I can't be in all 12,000 classrooms at the same time every day, right? I think for the most part, our teachers are conservative and factual and follow the academic knowledge and skills that we have set out for them in Gwinnett County Public Schools.
But you can't dispute that this occurs then. Sorry to interrupt.
I'm not saying that there might be a rogue teacher or two that try it, but I mean, I know as intentional parents, when our 4 kids came through North Gwinnett, you mentioned athletics. Yeah, we were going 100 different miles in different directions with our kids, but there were a lot of times where we would sit down and we'd have that family meal and we'd talk about what was going on in school. And they would share some things with us that we would say, oh, well, maybe you ought to go back and ask your teacher this, or maybe you ought to look into this, or there were some books in language arts that we went, no, you're not reading that book. I mean, there are plenty of opportunities for our students to push back, but we have to be intentional. We have our assistant principals are supposed to observe our teachers 4 times, throughout the school year. Okay. We contract with our teachers 190 days a year, right? So our assistant principals, if you've got 100 or 120 teachers in the school and you've got to be in front of them, plus you've got to do make sure every student's in class at the right time in the right class and all the different things that go with it. We can't observe every teacher, every class.
Oh, of course not. So,
right. So I'm not saying that you might be able to find an example. And in this case, there was another guy, and I won't mention his name. There's another guy who stood in front of our board, and we were talking about critical race theory, which is another, I'm sure, is on your list to try to get to. And he told us, he started by saying, we don't teach critical race theory in Gwinnett County Public Schools, which is true. And then he went on to give his example of how he didn't teach it by talking about it and bringing it up and doing the sort of things that he did. And then at the end, he said, oh, I guess we do teach it in Gwinnett County Public Schools. Well, Bill, that, we have all of our associate superintendents and assistant superintendents in the room when we have our board meeting. If someone didn't have, and that young man is no longer with Gwinnett County Public Schools. So my guess is that his admission that in his class, he wanted to introduce critical race theory either met with not enough acceptance or plenty of resistance to where he now teaches in another school district. Okay. So look, we have the AKS for a reason. We can hold teachers accountable to how they're teaching the AKS, how they're straying from the AKS. The way that we're going to know if that's happening is intentional parents, especially in the area of history and social studies, having ongoing discussions with their kids about what's going on in their class.
Right. But the key tenet of critical race theory is the existence of systemic racism, and a lot of people believe this. And so it seems obvious, correct me if I'm wrong, that would have to seep into the teaching. But what I hear you say, it isn't as prevalent as parents may think. Is that correct?
Yeah, because again, if you take, there's so many examples of things going on around the country, right? And you're hearing about it in school board meetings, you're seeing it, there are school districts that adopted CRT and included it into their curriculum. To take the same thing that's happening in Loudoun County, Virginia, or New York City schools, or Chicago, or LA Unified, or whatever, Houston Independent. I mean, take whatever example you want, to believe that somehow in those larger districts, what's happening there, you can just overlay it in Gwinnett and remove the Gwinnett context and say, well, it happens there, so it happens here. It's ridiculous. So again, it's a thought. It's something that's out there. We have to be vigilant. We have to be eternally vigilant to make sure that, and I've talked specifically with our associate superintendent of curriculum and instruction, and he has very forcefully told me that what's included in CRT is not going to be included in curriculum in Gwinnett County schools. And we have a review process, Bill, every year of the various curriculums that we're looking at. It's called our GEMS process. And we have parents, we have community members, we have administrators, we have teachers. They all come together and they spend an entire day looking through our curriculum. I guarantee you, if we had CRT in our curriculum, you would know about it. Are there teachers that are weaving it into what they want to teach in terms of a social context? I can't say that doesn't happen.
Right. Well, there's subtle ways to do that without being brazen about it. It just seems that there's a parade of students that express this as their opinion, that systemic racism exists, and a lot of parents are concerned about it. I guess my question is, do they have a right to be? And it sounds like you're saying they do have a right to be, and they should be concerned about it, but it's not as bad as they think it is. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, the old saying, right, that all it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. I'm going to tell you, Bill, we have to be eternally vigilant. We at Gwinnett County Public Schools, when it comes to our curriculum, are vigilant. We are looking at what we teach and how we teach it with a fine-tooth comb over and over and over. And so from that perspective, we want parental involvement. We encourage parental involvement. We ask them to be involved in our process every year. We say, come look at this, look at the syllabus, look at the different things that we're teaching, look at it, let us know, right? So there's nothing that's saying here, okay, parents, go away. You're not teachers, let us teach. That's never been the attitude within Gwinnett County Public Schools. You see that around the country. As long as I'm on the board of directors, that will never be the attitude among Gwinnett County schools. Now, is there pedagogy? Are there things that we know from a teaching profession that work to educate our kids? Yes. So there may be some conversations about you wanting us to not do this or do that, right, from a structural or how we do what we do. But the what, I will say, again, having this discussion with our associate superintendent for curriculum instruction, having those concerns myself, if I were a parent and had kids in school today, I would be concerned about those things. But to think that because you've heard a school district in America do a certain thing, that it's happening in Gwinnett County Public Schools, that's a bad assumption.
Who are the key, I hear this word a lot, who are the key stakeholders? I should say, who is the most important group of stakeholders?
Yeah, it's kind of that can be kind of a gotcha question, because you can think about who are our constituents, who are we? So at the end of the day, the greatest impact we have is on our students. But you and I both know, having a little bit of life experience, that what we know today, we didn't know at 16, 17, 18, that the opinions we had and the opinions some of our students have today are not what they will hold 10, 20, and 30 years from now, right? Because they'll go out into life and they'll realize what reality is, and their ideas will change. So we can't just take carte blanche. If a student says, look, I don't like tests, it's like, well, I get that. And there's pressure that comes with those tests. And maybe we can figure out if there are too many high stakes tests that are an issue. But, when you go to work every day, you're tested, right? Can you get the job done? Can you meet that deadline? Can you formulate a plan to finish a project by a certain time, right? So there are some things that we know only come from hard work, application of effort, right? And there are a lot of people who would say, I want what my parents have, but they don't really fully understand the effort to which your parents have gone to get to the position that they're in, right? We've got parents, absolutely critical component, and probably the most important component, because they're entrusting us with their children to educate them. So parents, in terms of, I don't like the word stakeholder. I don't know who came up with it. To me, it's like we've either got people who are concerned or people who aren't concerned, right? But our business leaders, at the chamber forum last week, we heard about the constituency group business owners, right? If you're going to put a business in Gwinnett County, what do you hope you will have for that business? Good employees, right? Where did good employees come from? Come from a good school system. That's why for the last 20 years, 25 years, the chamber and the Gwinnett County Public Schools have had an amazing relationship. That's why when we needed to overcome overcrowding at Norcross, we built Paul Duke STEM High School, gave it a theme, gave it a high emphasis on science and math and technology. It's why when we needed to relieve overcrowding at Meadow Creek, we built the McClure Health Sciences High School, because we knew that every year there's 15 to 20,000 medical office, medical profession jobs that if kids are prepared for those, they can step, in fact, many of them right out of high school into a well-paying job. If they play their cards right at McClure, they can have an AA degree when they and certain certifications when they leave high school and go right into a well-paying job. So business owners, stakeholders, right? They're another constituency that's important. So, and then there's community leaders, you know, the list goes on and on and on. So the way I look at it is, if you're in Gwinnett County and you care about the product that's coming out of our school systems and you want to be involved, we want you involved. It's as simple as that. That's why, unlike many school systems, there's example after example of inviting people in to be a part of the process. This isn't we're doing it, you listen to us, the experts. It's never been that way. As long as I'm on the board, it's not going to be that way.
The word stakeholder does sort of imply that some people would not have a stake, in my opinion. So
well, see, then you, yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that, but
it's kind of a weird word to use, is all I'm saying. What is the predominant complaints that, just a couple, because I got a few more I want to kind of get through, but what is a couple of the predominant complaints that parents have?
The biggest complaint was really how we dealt with the pandemic. If you look at the last couple of years, the biggest complaints that we had were from parents in terms of how we dealt with the pandemic.
Did the mask wearing, did that last, in your opinion, did that last too long?
What I can say is, and I've tried to explain this to people, and this is one of the poor perceptions that's out there, is that people complain to the board, and you do complain to the board because we're at the top, we're the governance team. It's not a board decision. It's an operational decision. So our superintendent, Mr. Wilbanks, put that mask mandate in place. Our leadership team discussed that often, at least once a month, because they knew that we came into board meetings that we would be asking questions about it. We would know what they want to do. What I would say, Bill, is that while I don't know that there were better metrics in terms of cases and close contact and minimizing the effect that COVID had on kids. Remember, Bill, the key here is for kids to learn they've got to be in school. So in the summer of 2020, there was a push to go virtual. I led the charge. Louise Radloff was right with me at that time, to make sure that the superintendent held strong and gave the in-person face-to-face option and a virtual option. We ended up with probably on average about 55% of our kids in person and about 45% virtual. That was for the 2021 school year. At the end of that school year, we realized that while our in-person kids did okay, our virtual kids, for the most part, did not do as well. And it created a 30 to 70% learning gap. So when we rolled into the 2021-22 school year, this current school year, we knew, and as a school district, made the decision to go in person with not a concurrent or asynchronous model of teaching, but if you were going to go online, you had to go through our Gwinnett online campus. And again, we've had a Gwinnett online campus for years. So if parents wanted the flexibility and an online model, it's been available. So we said, okay, you're going to use that if you have the concern of having your kid back in school, because the bottom line here is that for kids to learn, they had to be in school. The CDC said, if you're both wearing masks, right? If you have a kid that has COVID, or a teacher, anyone in the school that has COVID, and our metrics from the previous year showed that for every COVID case, there were 7 average touches. The CDC came out and said, if a person with COVID and a close contact are both wearing masks, you don't have to quarantine the close contact person. So that's 7 kids with masks that don't have to be affected, that don't have to spend 10 days out of school. Start extrapolating those numbers, Bill, right? 8 kids affected by every case if you're not wearing masks. If you have 1,000 kids with COVID, right? That's 80. That's 8,000 students affected, 10 days each. That's 80,000 school days. So What I would say in defense of my administrative team who made this decision, the superintendent who made the decision, is to say that were they cautious? Yes. Were they overly cautious? Maybe. Were they ever unreasonable? No, because we have to consider all 180,000 kids. And I can tell you, Bill, and people don't want to hear this, but I can tell you that there are people out there that felt unsure sending their kid to school with a mask optional policy. Now, I think the mask optional, I think the choice, and I advocated this for basically the entire pandemic, was that it should be a choice, right? But, and I push back at, if you watch the board meetings and you watch the work sessions, you would see me pushing back every month on their decision, asking them questions. Why are you making this decision? Here's what's going on in other places. Have you considered this? Okay. But what people don't want to realize is that a mask optional policy still produced families who were concerned that their kids would not be safe. And so we had parents across the entire spectrum. So while we had a mask mandate in place, the only people who needed to be loud were those who didn't like the mask mandate. If we had gone mask optional before the CDC went mask optional or mask recommended, we would have had the same number of people on the other side. In fact, it happened earlier in the pandemic. Again, you go back and look at those, go back and look at our board meetings in the middle of 2021. And you'll see parents on both sides of the aisle passionately debating what our policy should be. So cautious, yes. Overly cautious, maybe. Unreasonable, no, because we're in the business of educating kids. Those kids needed to be in school.
The next question I have was, I didn't think this was going to be a big, this would be very controversial. So this bill in Florida, they call it the Don't Say Gay bill. It seemed pretty straightforward to me, but there's been so much criticism of it that it kind of sort of proves, supports the point that, in my opinion, that discussing a child's sexual orientation with a kid less than 10 years old should be prohibited. Do you think that the subject of sexual orientation should be discussed with children under the age of 10?
So let's be clear, that's a Florida bill, right? It's Florida piece of legislation. And I would say, yeah, there are certain things that are appropriate, certain things that aren't appropriate. We don't talk about in our curriculum. Sex education falls as a small part of our health curriculum, and that doesn't happen until your freshman year in high school. And we have all kinds of opt-outs. I think that's plenty early to discuss sex. I don't think we need to be discussing sex in middle school or elementary school. I think those are discussions left to the family. Look, I had 4 kids, right? That's not a fun discussion for whatever reason. It's not a comfortable discussion, but I had that discussion with my kids, right? That's my responsibility. That's the role I have. I need to make sure that my kids understand, based upon my beliefs, my faith, the different things that we understand as a family, right? What's expected. From a health perspective, there are some things that can be discussed. The basic biology, the things that come along with it.
Under the age of 10, though.
No. That's why I said we I believe appropriately have that as a high school class for freshmen. Again, with an opt-out.
Okay, sorry. Do you think it needs to be codified though? In the way that it's done in Florida?
Yeah, if the legislature wants to take that on and tell us that we can or can't do something, that's up to them. And that's fine. I don't think you'd see pushback from the majority of school districts in Georgia if they were to take up something like that. But again, that's their deal, right?
Is it codified in Gwinnett County?
It has not.
Do you
as far
think
as
it
I
should
know,
be?
I think it's worthy of the discussion for sure. Because I don't think that, to your point, if we go back to the curriculum discussion, right, and the fact that however you want to frame it, right, we invite stakeholders in, if you want to use that word, we invite parents in, we invite community leaders in. I'm pretty sure that our process of choosing our curriculum would keep that type of discussion from ever happening in Gwinnett County Public Schools.
There just seems
So
to be
I think
sorry.
our process protects that, because I do not believe that the majority of our community wants that taking place, right? So I believe our process protects that. So I would say that to begin with. If it's something that, again, this has not been an issue we've discussed as a board, because I think in Gwinnett County Public Schools, it's a very unreasonable position.
There seems to be such a huge public outcry against this thing, though, which seems pretty straightforward.
No, I think you're confusing loud with large. I think you're confusing loud with large, right?
Yeah, but I mean, my personal opinion is it's not. I agree with you. Most parents would think it's, and most teachers would even consider doing such a thing. But on the other hand, when you have a corporation like Disney criticizing it, that gives me reason to think maybe you ought to talk about it. But and you agree to do that.
I'm not in disagreement with that, but I also think that the way that our parents make a difference when someone like Disney makes a position or a stand like that is that they take a stand, right? And maybe Disney Plus subscriptions drop, maybe DVD rentals or DVD purchases drop, maybe people stop going to the Disney theme park. I mean, there's a lot of, you can vote with your feet, you can vote with your actions. So I'm just saying that's a Florida, it's Florida specific. It does bring up a point that's worth, but again, I think we have currently the necessary safeguards in place that we do not change our curriculum without going through that process, which includes the community involvement. So we're getting parental involvement. We always have, we always will.
Let's just put it this way. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss? There were some other topics I'd like to cover, but
yeah. What you found, Bill, is with me, a lot of people, I heard recently from a teacher that it's like, oh, you were the quiet one. Now that I've spent some time with you, I realize you actually can formulate an opinion and have certain beliefs that you stand on. What we've got right now, Bill, and you alluded to it earlier, with social media, with different things going on, there's a lot of drama out there. There's a lot of drama. I'm trying to bring a level-headed, common sense approach. I'm trying to build bridges, not burn bridges. I'm trying to find, in the 7th most diverse county in the nation, a way to have discussions with everyone, to figure out what we need to do to take into consideration all of the strongly held beliefs that we have around our county and incorporate them as best we can into a system that keeps its eye on the ball, and that is student achievement, student performance. If we're not preparing our students for what's next, and I heard one school district, I liked it. It was enroll, enlist, or employ, something like that. It's the 3 E's, right? If we're failing at that, then a lot of this stuff doesn't matter. The parents are going to take their kids and go somewhere else. I want Gwinnett to be a leader in how we perform. That I think that we have a track record of that. We have a track record of innovation. We have a track record of pushing decisions down to our local cluster level so that they can work with their community. They can see what businesses are in their area. They can come up with the pathways and academies for success. What we can't do, Bill, is we can't just make certain assumptions and believe that whoever's loudest makes the biggest difference. Because the loudness only depends on who has things working for them or against them. And as soon as you flip it, it's just another group of loud from the other side. So I have an economics background. I studied business and economics in college. What I love about good economists is they consider all the factors. COVID's a great example. For the most part, our government entities chose one factor: safety. That was it. Safety was the number one. Well, that can't be the only factor. It's an important one. Yes, I get it. Look, I flew out here to the West Coast for the first time in 2 years. What did I not have to do? I didn't have to wear a mask. It was a great trip. I loved it. But when I had to fly before, I didn't say, no, I'm going to drive to the West Coast. That's impractical, right? So I put my mask on, I got in the plane, and I flew over here. So the businesses had to make those decisions. The schools had to make those decisions. And we need to get to the point where we're making decisions based upon all the factors. And that comes down to the different things that our diverse community believes, weed through all the noise, and come up with the decision that gives our kids the best chance to succeed. That's what I'm focused on. All kids succeeding, all kids. If there's injustice, I mentioned it to you earlier, we need to look into it. We got to root it out. There's no place for injustice in our society anymore. There's no place for failing schools anymore, right? I believe we are focused on pursuing excellence and closing gaps. I believe that Mr. Watt or Dr. Watts brings a fresh set of eyes to look at those gaps and figure out what it takes to close those gaps. I hope that's the case. I hope that we have a nice long tenure of pursuing excellence and closing gaps. I hope we don't get caught up in what I call a social science experiment that doesn't help our kids. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. How do people find you and learn about your?
Yeah. So my website, www.Knudsen, 4, Gwinnett.org, Knudsen 4, Gwinnett.org. They can find me on Facebook. I think it's Steve for Gwinnett. I think on my Facebook page. I think the website's the best place to go. It outlines several of the critical issues, shows my endorsements. I'm endorsed by most of the mayors in my area, city council members in my area. It's a nonpartisan election on May 24th. That's another critical thing. A lot of people think that we're going to have an election in May and then another election in November. It's one election. We're nonpartisan. The legislature made that change. I'm reaching out across the aisle. I'm trying to, again, be inclusive in my campaign. I'm trying to, let people know that if you want someone who's going to wrestle with the issues to come up with the right solution for our kids, I'm your guy. You want a knee-jerk reaction? You want a bomb thrower? I'm not that guy. So I want to be reasonable. I want to be relational. I want to make a difference for our kids. And I think, again, in today's society, that happens by building bridges, not burning them.
Well, I appreciate you doing this. I really do. And that will end the episode. Appreciate you watching. You've been watching Different Take Podcast with Bill Griffin. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share, comment, and thank you for watching and listening.